Ladies and gentlemen, round 2 of 3 of the North American Simrigs Sprint Series final from the Hungaroring. If you saw the broadcast earlier today, you were going to be in for quite a treat, and that had less cars than here. Hello everybody, my name is Nick Amon, and I want to welcome you to tonight's broadcast. Joining me in the booth is going to be Mr. Sam Raworth. Sam, welcome back. Unless we've lost Sam, which is also a possibility. Or his mic's off, or it's on push to talk.
No.
Oh, there he is. We hear him. Sam, hello.
I did just speak. You still can't. Is it not loud enough or what?
No, you're good. I'm just going to turn you up a little bit. There we go. Try it now. Should be good.
Weird.
There
I
he
didn't
is.
change anything. Must be on your end.
Yeah, it probably was. But yeah, we're back. Again.
Yeah, I was trying to get into this one, actually. I love Hungaroring. I've done it a lot. And I was out there in practice, but I had a crash, and our engineers couldn't get the gearbox back up and running, so we had to put her in the pits, and here I am.
Well, it's nice to have you. It's good to have someone with skill here in the booth, as always. I'm just here as a voice, but we can't really talk about skill or lack thereof depending on who you're talking to. We've got 29 drivers on the grid tonight and a championship that is yet to be decided.
I mean, this is just 3 races for us, right, in NA, so championship is a little bit difficult to discern there.
Well, I mean, you had the sort of the regular season, if you want to call it that, with the 2 splits before they got merged, so I don't know. I might disagree with you, but that's just me.
Well, it's still, you know, with only 1 race down, with these sort of titans coming together from both splits, because as we know, there's 1 or 2 aliens in both of those splits that we like seeing combined here. But yeah, we only saw 1 winner last week. We got to see who comes out this week, and hopefully it's best 2 out of 3 coming up in the next one.
Well, the Titan currently on pole is Hamza Golzar, 42.57 for Captain Canada. That's a huge time. It's going to be difficult to overcome. Very tight in that top 7, a full second between everybody. Dornelis there, P3, pretty high up for him as well. Lovering in position 5. Brown, P7, and leading Pro-Am. I know we're mostly concerned with overall, but for the Pro-Am category at the very least, it is Brown that's leading it. 90 points for him. And Jonathan Clifford down by 30, so he's got a lot of work that he has to do. Dornelis leads with 158 points. He had an amazing outing last time, so he's going to look to repeat that here. But of course, Golzar is in the way along with Pierce. EU, some really good driving from the Honda drivers. And a very surprising winner. I won't say who, but I'll just say that it was very surprising. No one could have seen it coming. It was just absolutely incredible driving all around. We had, I think, 14, and it was action from start to finish. I'm not even kidding.
Wow, I tuned in at basically when you said, and that's it, and I saw only 12, but yeah, I didn't see any of the race. I was out working, but that's crazy. I hope that we have something anywhere close here.
Well, almost, actually, double what EU had, so if trends are anything to go off of, we could see even more action. But with the standings, Skylar Lovering, 2nd position right now. Overall, 134 points, only 24 off of Dornelis. Dornelis, again, does have that qualifying advantage. These drivers do get bonus points for their qualification. 5 for first, 4 for second, 3 for third, 2 for fourth, and 1 for fifth. Dornelis would pick up an extra 3 points. Loverick would be 1. That would just open another 2 points. So right now the gap is looking to be about 26. Goals are quite a ways down. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th position for the Canadian. But pole position could give him some much needed points here. Yeah, I'm wondering if we're going to see battles all over the place or maybe just select pockets.
Well, I mean, also, you know, Golzar had some bad luck last week, was able to pull a pretty strong finish out of it. If you look at what cars are doing well here, surprisingly the Porsche's up there. And so, you know, you see the Porsche, you see some of the Hondas and BMWs up there, which might make it interesting. But overall, this track is so wide and so free for, the grass on either side, and it just sort of makes for very easy racing, right? So even if you are super fast on this, you may be not able to pull away as easily because the overtaking zones are sort of everywhere. So if someone gets in your slipstream and sort of takes one turn a little bit better than you or over here, I think we could have fights pretty much the entire track. There's no area specifically where it's, really dangerous that I would see.
Yeah, you get some really good action through those sweeping left and rights towards Sector 3. You can get some really good moves there. Turn 1 here with Dornelis going through. Very popular overtaking spot, not just here with the GT3 cars, but even F1 cars. You see a lot of moves down to turn number 1, so I think that's where we're going to be seeing the most action here this evening. Also, wouldn't be too surprised into... Oh, we were just going to go into it, but never mind. Sort of that long right just before the chicane. You might get a little bit brave, but you got to be careful not to hit those sausage curbs.
Yeah, that's one of the problems around here is there's so much free space and you can take it really fast and drift out, but there are those limits that are also easy to hit and get a drive through.
Yeah, we saw a couple of those. Simon Bauer, the current leader for EU, only ahead by 141 points, so they'll look to close out the championship and maybe avoid a repeat of last season. I won't say what happened exactly, but he definitely talked about it. We saw with someone like him picking up a drive-through, which was very surprising. He managed to only lose, I think, 1 position by the end of it all. But yeah, I find that some corners, especially this one here, that Jonathan Clifford just went through, it's very, I think, pretty easy to run it out extremely wide because you have all that extra space on exit.
Yeah, I mean, even some of these corners, because you can get on the throttle so early, because it can push you wide, and because the next step after any of these sort of tight corners is typically a lot of full throttle, you got to be careful with that because you can wash out really quickly. So when you want to get on that throttle early, you got to have your TC in the right position or just sort of feather it. So you can go really, really fast around this track, but you can also make immediate mistakes at every one of those major corners.
Exactly, and those mistakes can turn into absolute heartbreak, especially if it's on a final lap. Just noticed Loverank pushes Dornelis out of the way for position number 3. That's going to be big for the championship. Extra point to close that gap down 23. Anybody else still out on track? We have a couple. Chris Frizza running around in P15 at the moment, not really improving, and as he comes out of the final corner, he does lose it. Marty Martinez, that's a name I have not seen here on the grid, joining us, and makes it position 24, and that'll do it for qualifying. And, well, I don't know about you, Sam, but I think I know exactly what's about to happen.
We're gonna look at some shiny objects.
We're gonna look at some very shiny, very loud objects, mind you. Amazing liveries as always. So let's take a nice little stroll through the grid, if I can remember how this works. It's been about 4 hours. We start, just look at all of them. I mean, even just walking up the grid, it's gonna look incredible, but going down the middle, I'm gonna love it so much more. Again, 29 cars on the grid. It's going to get chaotic here very, very shortly, I think. But let's take a look at the starting positions for all of your drivers here in North America. Another pole position for Hamza Golzar. Unfamiliar, or very familiar territory, rather, for him. But it's been a hot minute since he's been on the top of the timing sheet. Pierce joins him on that front row in Loverank. A very needed position 3 start if he wants to try to swing this championship back into his favor. Renato Dornelis just misses out on those top 3 steps. In position 4, I don't think he's qualified quite that low this season, unless memory slips me. And then it's Flamger, Marquez, Braden Thompson, Spencer Brown, Austin Carpenter, and Jonathan Clifford rounding out your top 10. Spencer Brown pretty close there to Clifford and wants to try to clinch the Pro-Am finals. He's going to have to do it this race, and probably next week. We'll keep an eye on that. Wilson, Boisvert, Kogan, Sanchez, Frizza, Dag, Fernandez, Rolo, Briscoe and Rasco, your next drivers down to 20th, and it's Lanham, Platt, Martinez, who we just saw cross the line not too long ago, Dave Hasser, Kevin Parody, William No, Sean Conway, and Ben Keogh, who was, as far as I'm concerned, locked out of the house prior to tonight's festivities, so thankfully he made it.
We're giving a big shout out right now to Ben's wife, who apparently got home just in time.
Yep, shout outs. You married the right one when she's able to get you in the house before your big sim race. And speaking of sim racing and all things beautiful, shout out to this season's sponsor, Simrigs. Another season with them has been amazing, and we'd like to thank them, of course, for their continued support of this amazing Sprint Series, Melbourne-based sim racing supplier, all of Australia and New Zealand. They've got you covered. And if you're like Sam and myself, or maybe other drivers outside of those borders, you're going to send them an email, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to get something arranged with you. And of course, our OR Patreon members do get 5% off their in-store purchases. So if you haven't already, at 100% use it. But let's get back on track here. 10 seconds before we get going on this outlap. And unfortunately, there is no safety car. I must say, I'm very upset. I'm very sad, but we carry on.
Yeah, someone mentioned it's about time for F1 practice to be viewed in, down under land, where some of those drivers and members of OR may actually be at the track. So maybe we have a less of a crew running today, but nonetheless, we're going to have everything going here, and we've dealt with virtual safety cars very well. Now, what's interesting, if you think back to qualifying, Dornelis only lost out of P3 by 7 thousandths of a second. Now, there's only sort of 3 races in the championship thing total. There's only this one and one more. I doubt it's going to come down to the difference between P3 and P4 in a qualifying. But if it does, we know where it was.
Yep, exactly. It's never over until it's over. We'll be at Barcelona next week for the final race of Season 12. I'm going to be there. Hopefully you guys are too. It's going to be, hopefully, a showstopper, if I'm being completely honest. This is going to be a part of the track where we're probably going to be seeing a good, decent bit of overtaking. Or not this, sorry. The next corner up normally is very, very popular amongst drivers trying to get a little bit of an advantage. It's not easy, and we've got the number 27 there of Rolo, who's having, thankfully not a bit of a rollover, does have some rear damage, so that's quite interesting.
In track's optimum, how did that even happen?
Might have given it a little bit too much juice. It was before that uphill left, so I don't know. Maybe got a little bit ambitious, but we'll have to catch up with the pack and probably get back into position. Hopefully he remembers where he was posted up.
Well, I mean, also hopefully it wasn't a lag that shunted him into the wall. That could cause some big chaos for him if he stays in the race and it, becomes more of an issue. But hopefully it was just a little bit of a mistake and he'll get back to it.
We wait for him. Drivers lining up 2 by 2 here as we get towards the penultimate corner. 150 points for whoever takes home first, and of course fastest lap, an additional 3 points tacked on there. Goals are Pierce, Loverink, Dornelis, and Flomger all going to pick up those qualifying points as well. And that will hopefully close things up before we get into the final race of the season. You see Rulo there just making his way back up to the grid. But ladies and gentlemen, around the final corner here at the Hungaroring, it's an hour on the clock. No mandatory pit stops. The championship still very much being discussed and fought over. It's another pole position for Golzar, Pierce, Loverink, Dornelis, Flomger, your top 5, Marquez, Thompson, Brown, Carpenter, Clifford. It's green here at Hungaroring. And look at the jump. Golzar gets immediately already bursting away from the pack. Pierce starting to come under pressure. Loverink on the inside. Dornelis around the outside. 3 wide through turn number 1 as there's a lot of heavy braking and more 3 wide in the background. Looks like Dave Hasser and company there in the tail end of the field doing a great job of keeping it together. And I believe also Tommy Kogan doing an excellent job there of avoiding contact with Fernandez, who has been swamped at the start. It's going to be Pierce who loses out quite a lot here as he's already down the field quite a ways. He's not from P2, or sorry, yeah, P2 on the grid, immediately getting booted long ways down. We'll see what this is when it finally updates. P7, and we do have a safety car.
Ooh, that's unexpected. I thought we got away pretty clean. I mean, I counted 6 different sets of 3 wide coming around turn one there, or coming towards turn one, which was really impressive. But none of them looked like they were, crashing into each other, at least through these cameras.
No, I'm not certain. I think we'll, oh, Wilson Fernandez is in the back. He must have been caught up in something. Let's see if we can really quickly find some, chaos. This isn't it, I don't think. I don't know what happened. I don't really have much of, this is surprising. There must have been something that happened in the background. It's very slow.
Yeah, picked up on it.
I don't know. There may have been... I don't know. I mean, with Wilson Fernandez this far down the grid... Oh, yeah, drivers got to be careful. They're not ghosted. Woo. There it is. Not common that we have these virtual safety cars, or just safety cars in general. Marty Martinez making contact there. But, yeah, this is surprising. I'm not certain what the call is for.
Yeah, even with a virtual safety car, people have to know in OOR as soon as the race starts, any sort of safety car means that you're not ghosted.
Yeah,
sounds like they get going again.
They do. Gulzar timed it perfectly. Let Lovering get right up on his bumper, had him get on the brakes, and pulled away immediately. So we're back up in racing again here, hopefully getting through an entire lap in one piece, and with the single file line, of course. It shouldn't be all too difficult. Gulzar continues to lead ahead of Lovering, Flamger, Dornelis, and Pierce. Pierce picking up some positions there, so that's very good for him. Of course, drivers had to be careful through the start-finish line not to overtake the driver behind. They gotta wait till they cross that timing line before they can make a move. And it seems like everybody's done that pretty well as we go up and over through the left-hander. And drivers already starting to run wide. Brakes and tires should be coming up to temp here in just a couple of laps.
What's surprising is if you, at the very start, Dornelis got a really great run, but because he was up on the outside, even though he could have passed everyone on the inside if he was over there, he had to check up, and now he's still in the same place he started, P4, and Tim Flamger has been able to jump up into P3 there, and with whatever else happened to Pierce dropping down, Dornelis sort of got caught out, and so he didn't gain any places, but he was coming up real fast on everybody.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's just sort of the speed he has just in general when it comes to looking at the Sprint Series and just who he is as a driver. We've had Fernandez and Martinez into the pit lane, so probably damage. Hopefully not underfueling their car. That would be kind of embarrassing. Dave Hasser makes a move there on, looked like Ben Keogh. We've got 3 Aston Martins and 1 BMW fighting over position 17 at the moment. Platt leads at an amateur class driver, ahead of Lanham, who is Pro-Am, along with Hasser and Keogh. Pro driver this far down the grid, it's surprising, along with Sanchez. So battles are starting to form. Austin Carpenter as well, coming under fire there from Clifford.
Well, yeah, Ben's down there. He didn't get to get in and qualify because of getting locked out, but he's certainly moving through them pretty quickly. I mean, yeah, I think he's up like 10 places now, maybe 9. But anyone pitting, he started 20-something, didn't he?
Yeah, 29th. He's up to P19.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, anyone pitting because of damage or for any other reason in this race is going to be a real big problem, assuming that they go with the sort of same strategy I assume everyone's going with. This is a 60-minute race with no required pit stops. You can do it all in one fuel tank, all in one set of tires, and all that stuff. And it's optimum. So this is going to be a fast and just sort of, linear race. There's not much strategy involved here.
Yeah, we saw in EU some drivers under-fueling their cars, maybe expecting the mandatory stop, but of course, as you can see, to the right of the driver numbers, that little green bar means you've served any pit stops, but seeing as there are none, it doesn't need to be anything else. Now, if it were orange with a number, that means you have X number of pit stops to do, and of course, it only counts a pit stop as tire changing, not just fuel. But like you said, Sam, drivers only have to worry about getting start to finish, and also managing their tires, because if you push the car too hard, of course you're going to degrade the tires, and over an hour-long race, that's going to be sort of the last thing you want, especially some of these corners, how much grip they demand.
Yeah, what's going to be kind of crazy to watch, though, is as the gaps form, I mean, if the gaps form, right now everyone's within a second, and look at this overtake right now. I mean, straight down the main straight, we're going to see this over and over again. But as those gaps form, and we're going to have like back markers and blue flags and stuff, you don't really know who you'll be fighting. You'll have this, coming up behind him, that BMW on the Aston, basically almost tapping him, and now getting past 2 or 3 Astons in a row. You might have these 4, drivers fighting while you've got Dornelis and Gulzar and Flamger trying to come through later. There's no pit stop that's going to save them.
No, you're absolutely right, and that just adds to all the pressure these drivers have, not only just driving this 1 hour, but making moves and defending their position, especially when you have these trains starting to form in these little groups. You have to worry about who's ahead, you have to worry about who's behind, you got to worry about your brake points, your gear shifts. Maybe you have to make an adjustment to your TC or your ABS. So there's a lot that goes through just one lap, especially at this stage, as things have already developed. And it looks like what is currently starting to come to light here is a battle for position number 19, as Cody Platt just sort of lets Hasser through, and Kevin Parody could also make some moves here. Hasser sticks to the outside, now the inside, but the Canadian backs out, and that is right what Dylan Kaiser wants from him, because that's pushed him a lot closer, and Ike Rollo as well starting to get in on this.
Say nothing of his skill. I think with the white pro flag there, they might have let Ben go by a bit, because this is sort of the cork in the bottle for the pro-ams and some AMs right here from P18 down. You see with these 2 Aston Martins of Hasser and Platt, and everyone is just right in behind him. That 3-second gap or so up to Ben Keogh is the first main gap back here in the race. Now there's a couple other smaller gaps forming, as we can see, but still up near the front within 1 or 2 seconds pretty easily.
That's just sort of what we can expect right now. And I mean, again, the race is still very, very young, so plenty of time for moves to be made, plenty of time for strategy to come into full effect, and that's something that you nor I could predict.
No, go for it. Who do you think is going to win based on right now?
Oh, no, I can't do that. We in the EU broadcast earlier, Charles gave a win, or predicted a win for a teammate of his. It didn't go over too well, so I'm just not gonna say anything. I think it's better if I just do the whole commentating talk thing.
Sure, it'll happen later.
No, I think I'd say maybe the top 5 we could see someone win. I think that would be a fair assumption, but crazy things have happened, and predictions can be thrown out the window with just one wrong turn of the steering wheel.
Yeah, certainly at a track like this, if the top 5 or even 2 or 3 are able to keep close to each other and have such tight races and stay in that slipstream, then you're going to have a lot of really tight fighting the entire race. Now, what that does is it creates a lot of opportunities for them to, have a couple spins and offs based on their, skill at diving in at the last second. So sometimes you have these great drivers end up punted back a few places, and then it'll surprise you who ends up in that top place.
You can never... I think even with the clearest of crystal balls, I don't think you could ever be 100% on your predictions. Well, drivers are definitely going to be keeping us on our toes the entire time. Not on track, but in the booth as well, as Tommy Kogan leads ahead of Dag and Rasco. I mean, I feel like we've seen these 3 together very, very often here in the Sprint Series.
I do wonder if any of them have some traumatic visions of the tail end of another. Oh. Just sort of sitting right behind that livery, lap after lap after lap.
Yep. Or maybe,
might get you.
Or someone having the front bumper burned into the eyelids as they continue to look at the same guy who's been behind them for lap after lap after lap.
Well, would you rather stare at Luigi, who's just goading you, or would you rather have a Monster Energy car coming up behind you?
I don't know. I feel like there's no right answer in that situation.
The answer is always Luigi.
Okay, my apologies. Okay, I guess it is always Luigi. Let's ride on board here. Dylan Kaiser, P23, just up ahead is car number 23, coincidentally. Kevin Parody, and just ahead of that is Cody Platt. And it looks like Hasser's gotten out of town. Kaiser might have gotten spooked there by the 420 of Conway. Able to mellow out and keep that Audi in the right direction as he carries on to the penultimate corner for another lap. And just behind them is William No, trying to maybe pick up some scraps here. Hope that they fight. That's kind of the big thing for him. If these guys can start fighting, he can start gaining some ground.
Yeah, this pack of four is definitely going to bring No back into the fold. I mean, he's just right there already. Yeah. Oh, we jumped up. Okay, it's similar white Porsche you jumped to, but okay, cool. Anyways, Dornella still within a second of Flamger within a second of Loverink. Of course, Gulzar has disappeared into the distance while not being tailed by someone like Dornelis. Not to say anything bad about Loverink, he's super, super, super fast, but Gulzar is, well, Gulzar.
Yep, and here's the thing, if the checkered flag were to fall right now, Loverink would take the lead, I think, of this championship. It might be 4 points. So for him, he probably has known this, so he has to work on just making sure he just grinds these laps out, gets to the end in one piece. Hopefully tires look good, fuel's good, everything's spick and span and ready for, you know, that checkered flag. Dornelis, though, you see how close he is to Loverink, and you go, oh, well, that's, you know, that's not too bad. But when you consider the caliber of driver that he's surrounded by right now, that's a very tough ask.
Well, also, I mean, you know, with people talking about the Porsche being particularly good at this track because it's such a downforce heavy track and a lot of just turns you can hold your speed, and the Mercedes is going to be tough to get around them. And this pack is exciting.
Yep, there's the Luigi machine of, I believe, Dag getting around Kogan, who gets loose, and that goes into a couple of other drivers. Rasco as well caught up, and is that Ben Keogh? It is. So that's been strange. I didn't see if there was a touch there onto the Audi, but that is definitely ruined quite a lot, and with 10 seconds also added onto Kogan, that's going to be a real kick in the gut.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a tap, then there was a bit of a drift, and then there was a bit of a slam. And I mean, it's unfortunate, but there's still a lot more of the race left. And also, you got to say, I mean, they didn't end up making some huge, you know, crash. They didn't rejoin in a bad way. So overall, sad, but not the worst.
Exactly, and look at Ben Keogh already back into the action, not missing a beat at all. Gets around Rolo quite easily, and then there's Cody Platt behind, leading ahead of Parity and Kaiser. This is a pack forming around position 20, or sorry, not 20, position 19, but seeing as Keogh's deciding that he's sort of done with these guys, it could be the battle for position 20, as we have, is that Lawrence Lanham off? It is. Lawrence Lanham off at the chicane.
Ooh, that's a real tough place to go up and then try to come back in, and that's what happens.
Dylan
Yeah,
Kaiser.
he just was not taking that slow enough. He wasn't being patient enough. He was probably angry at himself, messing up, and that's what happens. And unfortunately, he's definitely at fault there.
Yep, and that'll give Conway free position. That chicane, it's very easy to get wrong. It looks deceptively simple, almost like you can straight line it. But if you try it, you're going to find that's not always the case.
Yeah, I mean, you really can cut it as basically as much as you want. I think the limits aren't even that close, but going over those curbs, while a lot of cars can take it and continue going, if it does upset you a little bit and another car around you takes it a little bit faster, then you're going to lose those places. We saw him lose 2, 3, 4 places in a row before he was able to fight back and then end up ultimately crashing.
Yep, and Kaiser, Kaiser does go into the pit lane, so that's probably going to be for damage, and that might just be all she wrote for his race. Dave Hasser, Ben Keogh, the two Aston Martins disputing position 17. Keogh thought about a little bit of a last-second switch, but Hasser aware of it and holds steady.
I think at this point, if you're Ben Hasser, you've seen, if you're, yeah, I'm adding their names together. But if you're Dave Hasser and you see Ben coming up behind you for the second, maybe third time, based on a couple of slowdowns and crashes and such, I mean, it's just going to get a little tedious, isn't it?
Yep, and as you say that, there goes Ben Keogh right through on Dave Hassler just before the chicane. Picked the inside line, and it worked out beautifully for him.
Probably thinking, I'll see him again, it's fine.
Yeah, these guys are relatively familiar with each other, I think, all things considered, especially being in the same car. So we'll put a pin on that and get back to it if need be. Jonathan Clifford holding on to that final position in the top 10, although Andrew Wilson behind, looking to snatch it away. Clifford's last lap a 45.03, and that's now a 45.06 compared to Wilson's 44.95. So these guys very close to each other in terms of speed.
Yeah, actually looking down the list here, there's a lot of sort of little gaps and then immediately within a second behind. So there's a lot of two-person fights going on, which will tend to bunch up those gaps as the other sort of fights move in closer or as someone breaks away and ends up catching up to the next battle. The only time we don't see that is up at the front where we've got, you know, T3, 4, and 5 all within a second of each other up to Skylar Lovering, still cork in the bottle.
Yep, doing a great job of holding everyone else up. I'm sure that's all part of the plan, but at the end of the day, as long as you finish in front of the others and you do it cleanly, I don't see a huge problem with it.
No, not at all. I mean, certainly it's tough, right? No matter how much skill you have, sitting in front of 3 or 4 very, very fast drivers and watching them come right up your backside every time you hit the brakes, and maybe in the slipstream gaining on you in the straights for an entire hour because you all have similar skill, it's very difficult to maintain that for the whole time, no matter how skilled you are.
Yeah, the mental fortitude needed to just say, all right, I got to keep the guy in check, but at the same time, I can't lose focus. It's not really a skill you can develop overnight. It takes, hell, I'd say years of practice, really, in all facets of life to really nail it down. And sim racing, I think, is a pretty good way of seeing who's been practicing that the most.
Well, especially if you have been paying attention to the points as a driver. You know, Dornelis knows that he did great last race, but Gulzar was caught out, so he got this great points difference. But now he's being stuck in traffic. Certainly not as bad as Gulzar had to deal with last week, but, you know, Gulzar is disappearing. So Dornelis has to think, how do I get up there, at least to get in front of Lovering, because we talked about it earlier. They've got to, you know, close down that point system to make it a three-way fight for first if Gulzar comes into it.
Yeah, Gulzar, 150 points would be huge for him. 80 points, of course, for the Canadian, so that would put him well over the 200 mark. How that would play into the other roles, I'm not quite certain, but of course, these timetables getting updated almost immediately. I know I was talking with Glenn Germain earlier after the EU broadcast, and he was saying how he wants to get it, automatically as drivers cross the finish line, but that will be probably a project we'll see bloom in the following season. But he's still doing a great job nonetheless of keeping these points tables updated rather quickly.
Yeah, I mean, he's always impressive.
I mean, yeah, great guy. He's made he was doing some quote-unquote pit lane interviews, and it turned out that one of the drivers in EU did underfill his car, which is why we know that information. Just great sideline reporting from him, and always good to have him on the team.
It does look like we have a little bit of a train just disappearing here. Behind, we got the one in the gap, but after that, it just doesn't look like there's anything as exciting as we thought it might be. I mean, up front is really the only thing where there's something heavy going on, and that's, mostly Pierce trying to get everyone out of his way and get back to his P3.
Yep, and in the background, William No makes a move on Lawrence Lanham. Of course, the BMW behind has some pretty hefty damage onto it. Not enough to really, I'd say, make a dramatic decrease in performance, but definitely noteworthy. And for the amateur number 8, that's going to be good news for him. That'll be a free position. He's just got to work on getting away from him. But the problem is there's some experience difference between them as we head down the front straight, giving that slipstream, like you said earlier, Sam. That's going to be super important, especially here as we head down into turn number 1. Does Lanham pick a moment? He goes to the inside, brakes roughly the same, but no, just has to let him through. Maybe a possible switchback, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, none of the straights here are too long. It's not like we're at Paul Ricard or anything. Certainly the main straight's the only way that the slipstream's going to come into play. But that's why, here William Noe and the Porsche can keep up turn after turn after turn and maybe not allow the BMW to get away from him.
Yep, it's going to be a pretty sizable challenge to be made with just under 40 minutes to go. So the penalties that are coming through here, kart number 55, Tommy Kogan, a collision on lap 1 gave him a 10-second penalty. Car number 2, or sorry, no, apparently it's car number 2 on lap 420. I'm sure that's just an error. That's Sean Conway picking up a 5-second penalty for an unsafe rejoin, I'm going to assume on lap number 2. And then, yeah, it looks like that got corrected. And then 33, that's Ben Keogh picking up 10 seconds for a collision on lap 7. That may have been what we saw earlier with the Audi of, not Brown, I believe it was Kogan?
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that and noticing it was his fault. I don't really remember that one. But hey, I mean, we've had a couple of those, and that's something you have to contend with. If you stay within 10 seconds of the guy in front of you, maybe get an extra place. If you're racing someone who also has 10 seconds, then that's even a bigger challenge because you've got to fight your own battle. But I think the big issue we've talked about is as we go on, and they're just sort of hot lapping because everyone's spread out and people are trying to maybe catch up or maybe get those extra tenths off. As they start going a bit wide here and there, tires start going, brakes start going, those drive-throughs will really come into play.
Yeah, and think about when we get later on in the race, maybe the last 15 or 10 minutes. I mean, how bad are those tires going to be? How quickly will drivers rack up track cuts, and how soon will it be before one of them gets caught up in the drive-through net?
Well, I will say on the Porsche Discord thread, a lot of us were talking about getting our tires to sort of calm down because they're just sliding so much. I mean, it happens at every track in the Porsche, but here they really heat up really quickly and you can just watch them deteriorate basically. So as you're going through the race, you can adjust a few things here or there to try to put more of the weight on the front when you brake, and you can take turns a little bit differently, not have so much side slip, but it is something you're going to have to contend with as the race gets further.
Exactly, and that's why I kind of avoid the Porsche, because just the whole tire preservation is not really its strong suit. Also, the whole, the less fuel you have, the more likely the tail end wants to kill you in your sleep, so it's also another reason why I avoid it. Frederick Boisvert, however, has to avoid Chris Frizza, who has been sitting within a couple of tenths of him. This is position number 12 that is up for grabs at the moment. Boisvert's last lap, a 45.84 compared to a 45.61 from Frizza. A couple of tenths could translate into a position gain.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see that coming up soon. We saw a little bit of in the slipstream with Frizza catching there a few turns and sections back, but certainly he's keeping within that little... within a half second that you really need to be to take advantage of a slipstream on a track like this, especially when you then have to overtake and hold it around either the outside or brake earlier on the inside, and still, like I said, smaller straights.
Yeah, the surprising thing is Frizza's Sector 1 and 2 times on those last laps are faster. He's a tenth faster in Sector 1 and 2 tenths in Sector 2. Their third sectors are identical, and I'm sort of wondering why Frizza isn't maybe getting as much of a drive as he would have liked. So maybe it's a couple of corners he's gaining those few hundredths in, and that certainly seems to be sort of the opposite of what's happening, because it's Boisvert getting all those little time saves.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for drivers having preferred sections, but also a setup being better in certain sections. If you see in Sector 2, there's most of the turns that are all sort of sweepers and such, and then Sector 1 and Sector 3 are basically, autocross, advanced autocross, I think I said last week.
Yep.
They're going straight, hit the brakes, turn, going straight, hit the brakes, turn. So yeah, I mean, if your car is set up for that, you could see a major difference in sector times.
Yep, and even on something like this front straight here, if you have a setup that maybe favors downforce a bit more, you're going to be losing that time just because of the force that is pushing down on your car to keep it glued to a track. But like you said, Sam, through those sweeping left and rights, that's where you really gain most of your time. And every car just on its own behaves differently. You know, the McLaren there of Kevin Parody will have more downforce than, say, Dave Hasser in the Aston Martin, as Rollo decides to try to sweep around the outside here. Is not going to have the optimum line as Hasser holds strong, maintains, and keeps his position 18, but that might be a preview of things to come.
Yeah, that was certainly difficult for Rouleau, but I mean, we've seen cars that are able to keep that
Oh,
outside.
hold on. Trouble.
Ooh, and we have Pierce in the background.
Maybe we can catch this. Let's see. So there's the battle with... Oh, he gets an amazing run off the corner and just sort of has nowhere to go, it looks like. And then how does he spin?
Oh, contact with all of them.
Oh, wow. That was... I mean, he got such a run there. I was surprised that happened. Well, he's down in P7, unfortunately, and that... Wow, that was... I did not expect that to be the reason. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when you get a run like that on multiple cars rather than just one, it's very difficult to find out where to go, especially if they're both knowledgeable enough to play defense. You know, it's the same thing as like the start of the race, where if you get such a great launch, but there's a bunch of cars in front of you, there's not much you can do. You've got to check up here or there. You can try to go wide, but if you don't at least take it cautiously, you end up doing what he did, which is bump into somebody, and then you have the sacrifice for it.
Yeah, and that was the thing. You talk about positioning yourself as a driver. Both Dornelis and Flomger did an incredible job. They could have just picked one side and left the middle open, but they decided to sort of stagger their positioning on the track, not really giving enough room on the inside, not really giving enough room on the outside, and even in the middle. So there was nowhere for Pierce to really go, and it wasn't until the corner where he found an opening, but it wasn't meant to be. They were far too close.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you look back on it, you might be able to find something you could have done better here or there, but, you know, that's just racing. You sort of have to take one line and take that bet, and hopefully you're right, and if you're not, then you got to check up.
Yep, hindsight is 20/20, and well, I'm sure Pierce will be looking that one over a good few times. Here's Chris Frizza you're riding on board with, as he almost goes into the rear end of Boisvert there in the number 18 McLaren. Looks to the inside, but gets back on the racing line. Tries to scare the Canadian off his line, but that is going to be pretty tough to do. Frizza, slightly different line, tries to make a later apex, a straighter exit out of the penultimate corner, but it is going to be Boisvert who is cautious of that. Into the final turn and back onto the front straight once more. Frizza nipping at the ankles of the McLaren ahead, but not able to get a good hold.
This has to be extremely, extremely difficult for Frizza behind, because every turn we were just watching, he was faster. He had better lines. Even when he took that peak on the outside and had to come back in, he was still able to take that turn better. So at least on that sector, but maybe, you know, as we keep watching, he was having to hold up a little bit and accelerate a little bit later out of a turn and keep a line a little bit off at the end just to avoid hitting, you know, the back of Boisvert there. So he should really be in front of Boisvert based on what we just saw, but he's not going to if we see these sectors where, you know, straight line speed is sort of the king here.
Yeah, and even at the end of the front straight, it looked like he could have gone for a move if he was maybe a couple of meters forward, but just had to stand on the brakes a little bit longer, and that gave Boisvert a chance to sort of scurry away. But yeah, it's got to be extremely frustrating for this guy right here.
Well, especially when it happens for lap after lap after lap. I mean, it's not even a question of, you know, maybe something will change the next lap. You know they're going to pull away on that straight when you get to it. You know you're going to catch up on these other turns. All you can do is wait for a mistake.
Yeah, and Rollo experiencing the same sort of thing. He's been sitting behind Dave Hasser for the last few laps or so. Their lap times, it's 2/10 in Rollo's favor, so again, it's the same thing. Just you're faster than the other driver, but you just can't find a good way to get around, because when you catch up to that person, it's the most inopportune time.
Yeah, and I mean, the Aston's got a nice big butt too, so it's not the easiest thing to look out getting on the outside. I mean, like I said, it's a wide track. There's lots of space. You can take it. But when you're in the driver's seat, sometimes it really doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, it's sometimes defense feels a little too easy in the Aston Martin. Sometimes it's half the time you just sort of pick a line and you stay there, and your opponent's kind of stuck looking side to side, trying to figure out where they can make a move. Wilson Fernandez here makes a move on William. No, it doesn't look like there was much pushback from the Porsche, and the other vacuum racing Mercedes up into P27. There is going to be a lot of work if this man wants to even crack the top 20.
Yeah, there's some surprising people down there, and obviously crashes and damage and such, but there's 28 minutes left. They can make up some places. And, you know, what we're sort of expecting here is, as the race goes on, like we've said, maybe drive-throughs, maybe more penalties. So you got to keep going. You know, even if you took a pit when no one else pitted because it's a single 60-minute race, you keep fighting, you might end up making 4 or 5 places back, might end up making 10 places back. And look, Rouleau's got a drive-through.
I was just about to comment when you saw you talked about the drive-throughs. That corner that we just went through, that blind uphill left, it's so easy to run wide there. And that's why I was about to say, here's a corner where you can pick up a drive-through, and well, Rolo shows us just that. So he's saving me some breath, but that's gonna hurt.
Yeah, here at a turn 11 where we were just watching is also where I tend to get hit with those. And hey, look, here we are again, sitting behind the light blue McLaren, drifting away down the straight.
Yep, even in the slipstream, Frieza just cannot find any speed. Even if he's a bit closer, he's still struggling to get some ground there. Sanchez picking up a drive-through as well, so we're getting some very early drive-throughs. Rolo serving his, it looks like, from the broadcast controller, so we'll see that popping up relatively soon, unless I have not been baited. Aha, I was right. So we'll see if Sanchez decides. Nope, he won't. So drivers do have 3 laps to serve their drive-through penalties, unless they want to cop a pretty nice fine, and that would be a disqualification. The battle for P6, haven't talked about it too much because it's been a nice slow brew, and Pierce starting to give Thompson a bit of trouble.
Well, I mean, Pierce has got to be, I don't know, breathing heavily into a paper bag and clenching his fists from this race, you know, starting off P3, immediately dropping a few places, fighting with the likes of Flemger and Dornelis over and over and over, and then catching up, having that little spin, and now he's even back in 7th, and he's got to get past another good driver. I mean, it's difficult. I'm just glad he's staying in there, and he's still driving safe.
Yep, and keep in mind that last lap was half a second faster for Pierce, and this lap is actually 4/10, so there's some change as he takes a dive down the inside of turn number 1. Thomas Pierce commandeers position number 6, and he's going to be lining up Javier Marquez in the BMW not too far up the road for a potential P5 finish. And then it's going to be Dornelis, Flamger, Loverank, and Golzar, but one of those drivers, I think, a little too far away. But it was a very solid move there from the number 131.
Well, certainly using the, you know, best parts of the Porsche there. Really, really good brakes, and then as you get that turn in and accelerate out, you kick the tail around and you finish the turn much faster than some heavy, you know, Aston or BMW. In that case, it was the Aston. So you're really able to brake later and then get away faster and create that distance.
Yep, and that's some of the advantages and disadvantages we see with all of these cars. The Aston Martin, you know, I think it's just a very good all-around car, a very good beginner car. But that Porsche, she takes a special kind of driver to really push out every millisecond, and that is exactly what Pierce has done, shown that when you can master a car like that, you are rewarded handsomely.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with like the 1.8 update, the Porsche became a lot more safe. I mean, I was able to get around without crashing every lap. And I'm able to actually race it now, and endurance race it now, more or less. But it is still, you can make it safe, but you're slowing it down. You know, it awards kind of on the edge, on the knife edge driving. Whereas the Aston Martin can be very, very fast, but it can do it sort of with more stability.
Yep, Yep, and that's sort of these little tweaks and bounces that maybe bring these cars a little bit closer to reality. I don't know, of course. We don't have any sort of direct lines of contact with the guys who actually drive these things, but yeah, making some cars a little bit safer to drive when they're maybe unrealistically impossible. It's always a good change.
Yeah, I mean, that's what really makes this sort of aliens, right? Is that you try their setup and you might spin out into the wall in about, I don't know, turn 1, but somehow they're able to do a 60-minute race like that.
Yep, that's some mental fortitude, I think. Just, taking all that frustration out and slowly reeling the car into something you can use, and then once you find where that limit is, just really carving out that space. And that's where you start finding a lot of time on track, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Chris Frizza, in the meantime, I believe, has gotten the move done on Frederik Boisvert while we were looking at other battles, so while his eyes may be burned from the light blue McLaren, his rearview mirror might suffer a same fate if he can't open this gap up.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, was there a mistake made, or was it, an actual merit-based overtake? And I mean merit because he's been following him and catching him the whole time, but I mean, did he get a good enough run somewhere? In which case, that's even more impressive to think about. This is sort of like, I mean, these are two similar GT3 cars, but when you look at all of these cars around here, and we talk about how they should be roughly similar, but their setups can make them different, that's sort of exactly what you're seeing. That's that huge difference where it takes you forever and ever to get by someone, and then you can just gap them once you do.
Exactly, and speaking of drivers who want to do a little bit of gapping, Renato Dornell is starting to reel Flamger in a little bit. The Brazilian's lap 2/10 quicker than the Porsche ahead. That's going to be very good news for him, and of course Skylar Loverink is just beyond that in the BMW. Loverink's lap was slower than both of these drivers, so I know you talked earlier, Sam, about the whole cork in the bottle. Do you think Flamger is the cork to Dornelis?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, I've seen them talk in the past about some of their races where, Tim Flamger has been saying, "Oh, I was, chasing you the entire time, but just couldn't get it, just couldn't get in front of you, or maybe had some sort of issue here." So clearly, they're both fast enough to put it up for each other, but also the defense is going to be stellar from either of them. So you're sort of just, you are where you are until something ends up happening with the Porsche's tires, or maybe you catch a back marker or something. So I think Dornelis isn't really going to push the envelope here too much, knowing where he's at.
Yeah, no, but Dornelis, very mature driver, knows when to just back up and just let things run. You don't have to get around the person, but if you can just stick there and just really make them check their rear view a little bit more each lap, make it known that despite their best efforts, they're not shaking you, and then picking your moment to strike, usually towards those last 10 or 5 minutes of the race, I think is where we're going to be seeing some moves. So for right now, Dornelis knows that he doesn't have to push all too much. Just sort of kick back, let these laps tick over. And then once we get towards the end of the race, I think that's where we could be seeing a move get done.
Well, it also appears we're coming up on a back marker here, so maybe we might be catching the tail end of the grid. Maybe for the next couple laps or the next 20 minutes, we might see more of that coming into play with these top battles.
Yep, that's Eduardo Sanchez, a driver we normally see quite high up on the grid. Way back, of course, some unfortunate mishaps earlier on in the race has sort of demoted him down to the back of the grid. Chris Frizza, Frederik Boisvert, and Thomas Dag starting to get a little bit comfortable with each other and starting to run rather close. We're right on board here with Thomas Dag in P14, right behind Frederik Boisvert, fellow countryman from Canada. It doesn't look like he got the best run, though, out of the corner. The downforce on the McLaren playing very well through that uphill left-hander, and through this coming section is definitely where Boisvert could be picking up more of an advantage.
Well, certainly something to look out for with the 18 McLaren there is that, he was in front for so long playing defense on Frizza, and that can end up eating up your tires a bit. But then once you get overtaken, now you're in that dirty air from the same car you've been fighting for so long. So you really get hit hard sort of on the front end and on the back end, which means that the car coming behind, in this case, Dag, could get another place relatively easily if he just keeps at it. I mean, you can see him coming down right now.
Yeah, the aero wash, especially over the McLaren, is deadly. There's the Aston Martin of Thomas Dag going side by side with the McLaren there. Does get the move done into the final corner for Chris Frizza. That's amazing because that's going to give him a chance to start pulling away, and especially here on the front straight. This prancing horse is definitely where it wants to be. Thomas Dag giving a bit of a slipstream to Boisvert behind, but it's not really going to do all too much. And Brian Rasco, another McLaren, possibly joining the mix later on the brakes for both of them. And that, whoa, hold on, Frizza makes contact with Rasco, and that has just shaken everything up again. I really want to take a look at this and see what happened to Frizza, because that was
he was in the front.
There was no contact. I think he went wide and then comes back
really wide.
That's strange. I wonder if there was maybe a wheel problem or something.
I don't know. He might have just completely missed his braking point. I mean, like we were just saying, he was in that battle too. He was in the wash and fighting. And sometimes when you come out of those battles, the next lap or two is really dangerous as your tires and brakes sort of have to come back into their own.
Yeah, but it looked like he hit his brake point just fine. He made the apex. It wasn't like he overshot and had to, like you said, he had to kind of pull it back around. I think he nailed it, so I don't know. We'll have to, maybe he'll talk about it in the chat afterwards.
Well, he certainly ended up going wide, or maybe just staying out there knowing something was wrong. But back when we were watching the Thomas Dag move for that overtake, I just wanted to note how impressive it was that once he barely got past the nose of the car he's overtaking, he was able to dive to the inside, because if he didn't make that move, he would have been stuck on the outside of the next turn, and that's what made the overtake stick.
Yeah, that's some of those just microsecond choices that separate some of the best drivers from some of the greatest, and that was a very good showing as well. And William Nelson doing a little bit of his own professional driving there as he keeps Rolo at bay, but yeah, that's kind of the one thing we see a lot of here in the OOR with these drivers who have been around for a while, or even just some of the new guys who happen to just be incredibly skilled. Is you look at their laps and you say, well, they're running rather similar lap times. Why are they not making the move stick? But when you break down the lap and you look at how the driver takes each and every corner, and even on something like this little stretch of road, it's nice and straight. It's just those little microscopic details that are going to give an advantage or disadvantage depending on how you attack it.
Well, it's just crazy to talk about, right, in this and real motorsports and real life also. But it's very similar that you have all these little micro movements that make the difference, but we're talking about making micro movements while you're moving over 100 miles an hour on average for each lap. I mean, that's crazy on average. And you're, within millimeters of the cars around you. To be able to do that and do that well, there's a lot of skill involved, there's a lot of practice, but really it comes down to experience, especially in something like sim racing where you can't really feel everything so well. You can't be so much of a natural driver in sim racing. So we're talking about a really, really intense muscle memory that you gain there.
Yep, and speaking of muscle memory, these two guys have been doing just that and using just that these last, I don't even know how many laps that Andrew Wilson has been sitting behind Jonathan Clifford. I'm sure the sort of the shape and the lines and everything of that Lamborghini are going to be burned to his eyelids tonight. He's probably going to see it in his dreams if he continues to sit here. Jonathan Clifford, though, doing a very good job of hanging in there. And I believe just up ahead is Austin Carpenter, who is, unfortunately, kind of just in no man's land.
The grid says he's within a half second of the car in front.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was looking at the wrong gap.
Yeah, so this is one of those things where we have the two-person battles where, one will slow down the other or one will catch the other. So we might end up having a four-car battle, or we may end up having four cars in no man's land as they split apart.
Yeah, and speaking of two-man battles, Flomger still with Dornelis behind. You do see some lap traffic there. There's William No in the 711 Porsche having to let Skylar Loverank through, and soon enough he is going to be after let these two guys by. Another Porsche driver of Flomger. Probably going to be flashing lights, maybe saying, hey man, can you just use yourself as a bit of a screen so I can open up the gap to Dornelis? And there's also Rolo in the Honda as well, so they'll probably be letting these guys through on the front straight. The blue flags are out. There's no... Looks like he had a snap of Oversteer, kept it safe, so he'll say, yep, there's my move to let you guys out of the way. There's Loverink, Rolo, Flomger, Dornelis, and no, just entering shot before the camera swap. But these back markers really start throwing a wrench in the works, especially this late in the race and when your opponent is oh so close behind you.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been a lot worse because, you know, No was actually close enough and battling. I think he was even maybe in front the last time we saw that battle. So those two back markers fighting are really loath to move out of the way in a bad place for the blue flags, but they ended up making it work based on sort of that mistake.
Yep, and that's sort of the, I would say, the hallmark of a good back marker is knowing that when you make a mistake, sometimes it is better to just say, yeah, you know what, I meant to do that, and letting the guy on through and making sure the race keeps going for not only yourself but others involved. A skill that is, I'd say, maybe sort of practicable in general sense, but for the most part, it's just something you continually pick up.
Speaking of picking up, we're picking back up with this race with, I don't know, Pac-Man in your back mirrors. I think a little bit more worrying than Luigi back there in the Aston Martin. So, I mean, think about this. You're in the Lamborghini driving around and all you hear is waka 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 coming up behind you. Gotta be a little bit scary.
Yeah, but thankfully he hasn't found the power pellet, so he's not gaining a speed boost. So for Clifford, that's a very good thing.
That's true, but if he does crash and become a ghost, it might be a problem.
Well, you know. Yeah. All right. Well, one of the ghosts was green, right? Or am I thinking wrong?
Probably.
I don't know. I haven't played Pac-Man in a while. Jonathan Clifford, though, this has probably been the closest that Wilson has been all race. These last laps, it was Clifford by 2/10, but unfortunately, it seems like that isn't really much of the case right now because despite that change, despite that difference, he has not translated it into much of a removal from the scene. Hold on, is Renato Dornelis getting around Timothy Flomger? He does. So Dornelis onto the podium, and he's possibly going to be taking Lovering down.
I'm fairly certain this is a tire thing. The last time we dropped onto this race, you could see Tim Flamger here was going just a little bit uneasy out of a long sweeper. It's not so much the braking and turning, it's when he gets on the gas and seeing it just sort of shake a bit. That's probably what ended up happening, and he sort of knew his fight was over at that point, I imagine.
Yeah, and up and over the left, I think he just lifted a little too much, and you saw the gap that opened up to Dornelis, so yeah, it probably is a tire degradation thing. So maybe has not practiced keeping those tires in check. I know you said earlier, Sam, that the Porsche is not easy to keep tires in good health, but is definitely able to do so as Ben Keogh gets a pretty good run there. Out of the long sweeping right, later on the brakes into the chicane, does get the move done on Frederick Boisert. However, a 10-second penalty hangs over him. So while it is a position gained, it will most likely be a position loss by the end of the race, unfortunately.
It's also a really tight place to make an overtake, which meant that with this 18 McLaren, Boisvert had to slow down a little bit, bringing Ben Keogh, or actually Chris Frizza, right back into the fight here, which, I mean, he was sort of there, but he did have a little bit of an accident, so he's caught back up. I feel like Ben Keogh's passed maybe these guys 4 or 5 times this race. It just feels like that somehow. And, Brian Rasko really lost out from that little clash.
Yeah, he's a long way back now, unfortunately. Or Brian Rasko, do you mean Chris Frizza?
No.
Brian Rasko.
Chris Frizza, yeah, Rasko and the Monster McLaren.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about him. He is. I don't even know where he's at. He's kind of been out of the picture for a while, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, he lost about 10-11 seconds when Frizza punted him, and Frizza was able to keep up, and he's back on this pack right now.
Ah, yes. You can see how well my memory works sometimes, and then it doesn't. But well, we find ourselves again with Jonathan Clifford and Andrew Wilson still trying to figure out who's going to take home P10. It seems like the negotiations... Whoa! Big slide there from the Lamborghini. Kept it under wraps, able to control the bull. And holds on. That's going to hurt his lap times. Clifford was 2/10 slower this time, so it looks like they're sort of just going back and forth over who's faster each lap, and that's why we haven't seen much of a gain for either of these drivers.
Well, so there's two major, things that come into play near the end of the race. So we're at about 9 minutes left. The first thing is obviously the degradation of your tires and brakes, and actually right now we're just going to talk about this too wide going through the S's. That is just beautiful staying around the outside for Ben Keogh there. Just giving Luigi the middle finger as he drives on by, and he's probably just going to pull away at this point. He's had a really, really good race, even with the start sort of not going his way. But like I was saying, tires and brakes do degrade, but also you start looking at that clock. And if you're in these battles for lap after lap after lap, you start thinking, where do I make the dive? Where do I go for this? Because patience just isn't doing it. So with one car maybe a little bit, squirrely, and the other car trying to make some not cautious, dives and moves, then that's when we start getting a little bit of these, fights, punts, whatever, near the end of the race.
Yep, and it's definitely gonna be like you said, all those factors, brakes, tires, time, it's all gonna be getting into the heads of some of these guys. Jonathan Clifford, Andrew Wilson especially, seeing as they've been keeping each other nice and company here after I can't even tell you how many laps at this point.
Yeah, the other thing that a race like this does, with it being just 60 minutes and no real pit stops, I mean, every car should be able to make that with a full tank, and even less than a full tank, no problem. But these are racers. They still want to eke out every, ounce they can. Did anyone screw up their fuel calcs?
Well, according to one Glenn Germain, it appeared as though earlier on in the race, everyone was fueled to the end except for Martinez, who did have to pit. So we kind of missed that. That's why Martinez is down in P27 at the moment. But yeah, you can do 60 minutes with no pit stops on a properly fueled tank. That can't be. Oh, no, that must be. That's not Dornelis. No, that was Fernandez. I was scared for a second. I was like, "There's no way Dornelis closed that quickly."
Yeah, it doesn't look like he's closing that quickly on Loverink either. That was right about where Tim Flamger was, about 2 seconds behind Loverink. So, Dornelis took the place, but then hasn't really been making any inroads.
Yep, Loverink's last lap, a 45.27. Dornelis, a 45.03. So, pretty close, but the problem is that gap is quite massive. And speaking of massive gaps, we'll see what Golzar has 15 over Loverink. I mean, come on. We saw it with when we were running 2 splits in NA, and he's just doing it here. Imagine how much different the points would look if he didn't have his incident in the first race.
Well, I mean, clearly he's coming back with a vengeance, but also I would maybe hesitate in the future to say, speaking of massive gaps.
Well, I understand the power that, you and I both hold, and I'm sure Charles as well over in EU knows the destructive power that he wields every time he walks into the booth, but I mean, we've seen this from Golzar how many times, not just here in this season, but past seasons.
I meant the innuendo of it, not the curse.
Oh, that too. Yep, I definitely knew that. Yep, I'm a professional.
Oh, man. This is still going on, these three. This is real fun to watch.
Yep, Dag.
These two also,
boys.
I mean, there's a couple nice battles going on, and actually, if you look up forward, it looks like Pierce is catching on to Tim Flamger.
Oh, yeah, he is. He's been finding some time each and every lap. This last one for Pierce was a significantly bigger margin, but then again, Flamger was having to let Dornelis through, so that's why he's lost a good chunk of time. This time around, however, Pierce only 500ths faster than his fellow Porsche, and there's something about the Porsche livery on Pierce's car that looks, I don't know, it feels like almost a throwback. I don't know.
I think it is made in the game.
Well, no,
so
I mean,
it is sort of a standard livery.
Well, no. Like the red on the bumper there, like on the grill, I don't know. It just seems like it's, I don't know. I feel like I've seen it before. I mean, obviously I have, but you know what I mean. Like from
yeah.
past years. I don't know. I remember playing one of the first simulator I ever played was Sports Car GT, and I remember some of the liveries in that sort of looked like the ones here. So I don't know. Anyways, we'll worry about that
This
at
is
another time.
well, this is one of those crazy two Porsche battles. You really don't get these very often. I mean, it's just weird. You know, there's not many drivers of the Porsche, and they don't usually come together like this. So I don't know why, but you don't really see these too often, and it's really cool to watch. You know, because every time you're sitting in the driver's seat view, you get to see just how much the car in front or behind moves around.
Ooh.
And Boisvert has lost out on that little three-person battle.
Does he have fuel? He does. What is happening? That's very strange. He just stopped on the side of the road and, well, now he's down in P15. That's, wow, I'm surprised.
He seems to have picked back up on it, so it's clearly not something serious. And, you know, he might have gone off and sort of scared himself a bit and maybe hit the wall, but seems like he's still able to continue.
Oh, hold on. Cody Platt with Lawrence Lanham, and there's Hamza Golzar. This is going to be a very scary thing. I don't know, Golzar is going to think better of it and just backs out. He knows that he's not going to get that move done. With the blue flags, it's going to be impossible. But Cody Platt and Lawrence Lanham, these two guys, haven't talked about them all that much besides Lanham earlier on in the race. For position 21, so even this far down the grid, there's still drivers fighting over position. We got to pick back up with the Porsche battle right now, as Thomas Pierce got extremely close there to the number 19 of Timothy Flomger up through the left. Had to back out though, and this is what happens when you get two Porsche drivers who are vying for the same position. You get some incredible looking moves there, as Flomger bouncing over the curbs to try to find some extra time. Pierce maybe sensing there's blood in the water and is going to try to go for the kill. Stumbles over himself. Just over 2 minutes to go here, and I think we're going to have another lap after this, or not after the one coming up, but the one beyond.
Well, I mean, think about this too. Like, Flomger's had to defend against Dornelis all race. Now he's got to defend with his life for the end of the race here, and yet somehow he did actually gain a bit on Dornelis, and Dornelis did actually drop a little bit. So who knows, in the next lap or two, this might be a three-way fight for the podium.
Quite possibly. You can see just how close Pierce is, though. Last lap for Dornelis, a 45-1. 45-0 for Flomger, 45-0 also for Pierce. We'll see what the times are looking like as they come across. 45-0 for Dornelis, 45-5 Flomger, 45-4 for Pierce. And the battle continues on for position number 4. Pierce peeks to the inside, but has to just slot back into place. Although slightly different changes in speed could give him a better run out of the corner. It doesn't look like it. You can see him sort of sweeping side to side, maybe trying to throw Flomger off. There's a little slide there from the 19 that does invite Pierce up. There's some contact, but Pierce backs out of it, doesn't want to give a penalty over to himself. We're going side by side up the hill. Is someone going to be brave? Is someone going to back out? Thomas Pierce is going to be the big loser there, but he does have the inside line for the next corner. Thomas Pierce later on the brakes and finally gets around Flomger. He can open up the taps and he can start getting towards that checkered flag just one position sooner. Incredible stuff.
That was just amazing respect between both drivers, because to be honest, you know, with Flomger's issues sort of coming to head here with all the defense and then getting a little bit out of sorts, once that run started, he sort of lost the position anyway, but he was fighting so tooth and nail that Pierce was still able to respect it and still able to get around safely, even though there was that little bit of a touch.
Yep, and in the meantime, Cody Platt, I think, will be able to get away with this one. Position 21, as Lanham picks up a drive-through, which does have to be served, of course, because it is the final lap. Hamza Golzar, the final tour here for him at the Hungaroring. This is going to shake things up quite a lot in the standings, especially with him picking up not just 5 points for qualifying on pole, but also an extra 3 points for fastest lap. So he could be looking at a very clean evening here. 158 points, the maximum amount that you can get in these rounds, and that's going to be great news for him.
Yeah, it looks like we have a couple battles here with 1-2 within a second of each other, so that's all coming down to the last lap, last dives. Maybe a drag race on the straight.
Ooh, that would be very, very exciting. Javier Marquez finding himself in a bit of hot water, having to deal with Braden Thompson, and we do see Eduardo Sanchez up ahead there in the 21 McLaren. He is going to be blue flagged, but I don't know if he's really going to be a contributing factor. Sanchez, extremely talented driver, and he is going to use that to his advantage. Cody Platt with Wilson Fernandez. This is a battle for position. Position 21 for Fernandez, who is already a good ways down. He's just looking to get some consolidation points here at the Hungaroring, and these guys are going to have to do it again because Dornelis has not Golzar has not finished the race just yet.
Well, these two cars are extremely similar. At least in real life, they both use the same engine. I'm not sure if they do in racing, but, you know, they're roughly similar size. They have roughly the same sort of go fast, hit the brakes, and power out. So this is a tough battle.
Well, unfortunately, it looks like it's not actually going to matter. Hamza Golzar makes it across the line. A demolishingly quick race, or massive domination from him. Skylar Lovering, this is going to be some very good points in his pocket. P2 for the number 52. Renato Dornelis starting 4th, finishes 3rd. The podium is home for him. Thomas Pierce has gotten around Flaunger at the best of times, 4 and 5 for the Porsche duo. Javier Marquez doesn't have to worry about Braden Thompson because the race is over. 6 and 7. Here's Austin Carpenter, another Porsche into the top 10. Number 8 for him. Spencer Brown in the Audi, the only Audi to make it this high up the grid. And it looks like Jonathan Clifford has held off the assault from Andrew Wilson to close out the top 10. Ben Keogh, 10 seconds added on. Frizza will be picking up this position. He is close enough to take advantage of it. Yeah, it looks like. And Thomas Dagg will be missing out. Brian Rasco picks up a drive-through at the worst possible time because that's going to add 30 seconds onto his finishing position.
Yeah, he had actually made it through those two 10-second penalty guys, or at least through one of them, and I thought, okay, good, he's gained position, he's not going to have a problem, and a drive-through in the last lap is just the worst feeling.
It really is. It looks like Kogan will be able to take a position as well. Dave Hasser will not get any sort of promotion. Kevin Parody, a driver we really haven't talked too much about, finishing ahead there of one of the Mercedes drivers. And that's going to do it. That was a relatively quick race, all things considered. I thought it was going to take longer.
Yeah, it certainly feels quick, especially when there's no pit stops. And, I mean, it wasn't sort of the sit back and watch the gaps move slowly around the track. There was battles in certain places the entire time to go look at.
Yep, and, well, that's gonna do it for the race tonight. So let's take a look at your standings here for this race. Hamza Golzar home by just about 15 seconds, and the extra set of points for fastest lap on top of qualifying is going to give him a neat, clean ace. 158 points in his pocket. Lovering P2, Dornelis P3. We could be seeing a possible 3, maybe 4-way battle for the championship next week. Pro-Am, Spencer Brown, another win in the Pro-Am category for him. That's going to open up the gap to Clifford, who did not have the best race comparatively. Wilson and Frizza join him on the Pro-Am podium. And then for the amateur class, it's Cody Platt, William No, and Sam, you happen to be there. Congratulations on the podium, of course. And then Martinez all by himself, very late arrival. But man, what a slow battle we had. Brian Rasco really quickly down to P20 right at the end.
Yeah, the 30 seconds will do that to you. Even with the two cars behind him having 10 seconds in themselves, unfortunately, he just wasn't able to hang on to it.
All right. Well, I've gotten news from Glenn Germain that there has been an update in the standings. So we're gonna take a look. Let me see if I get the right overlay to see if we can find it. I don't believe I may have. Oh no, I don't. All right, you guys will just have to trust me on this one. All right. Oh, baby. So, despite what I thought, Dornelis 275 points. Skylar Loverink, 267. That's an 8-point gap. Golzar, 238, 37 points. Javier Marquez, 205, 70 points off of your leader. So we could be seeing a 4-way fight at the end.
Well, the big thing, too, is in this race, the top 5 drivers where they started, only 2 of them changed positions, and that was Pierce and Dornelis swapped in the end, at least in total. So Dornelis moving up into that podium got him even more points to keep his place on that list.
Yep, and at Pro-Am as well, Spencer Brown, 165 points. Jonathan Clifford, 130, so 35 between them. That Pro-Am crown as well still up for grabs. And Cody Platt, I think, might be clear of his fellow competitors, although anything can happen. But man, this top 4 right here, Dornelis, Loverink, Golzar, and Marquez. I think Barcelona's going to get pretty bloody.
Yeah, do we know the settings for that?
Not off the top of my head. I believe it's... I think there was discussion about... Or not discussion, but I believe in one of the settings tabs, or when we were talking about it, whatever it might have been, I can't remember. I think there was talks of a 2-stopper, but I could be wrong.
It would be nice to have some strategy come into play there.
Absolutely. Well, besides that, we'll have to wait and see. North America is still being debated, and we are going to be there for the final race next week at Barcelona. Sam, closing thoughts before we head out here this evening.
Well, I was disappointed not to take part, but man, I mean, so many close battles just to take in and be entertained by. I mean, the time went by so quickly for both of us. This is just a great time.
It was, absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was surprised to not see as much action as we did in EU, but hey, we still had a lot of those battles that was just, oh, what if? Is this person going to go for this move? Are they going to have time for it? But, yeah, great stuff here tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, one final quick shout-out, of course, to Simrigs for sponsoring Season 12 of the OOR Sprint Series. We've talked about them before a lot this season. Out of Melbourne, they've got you covered. Australia, New Zealand, everyone else, send them an email. They'll be more than happy to do some business with you. And our beautiful, beautiful Patreon members do get that 5% off in-store purchases. So please take advantage of that. These things, not cheap by any means, but Sam pretty much said everything I wanted to say. He is on my wavelength, and, well, I like to keep it that way. But on behalf of myself, Sam Raworth, and everybody here at the OOR, I'd like to thank you so much for stopping by. Hope you enjoyed your stay. 1 week decides it all at Barcelona between 3, possibly 4 drivers in the pro category to take home all the marbles. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, as always, stay safe, stay beautiful. Hope you're ready for an extremely fiery finale.
It's all about humanity.